Astrology ultimately is a study of what we call karma. Karma means actions that lead to other actions. In fact, in Bhagavad Gita, which is the essence of all the Vedic literature, it's kind of a summary of the key principles, explains that karma is defined as actions that lead to the development of material bodies. So this is the context in which we have to understand the principles of astrology, that actually we are not this material body. We are just like the driver of a car. We're the self within the body, and the self is indestructible, spiritual substance, whereas the body is a temporary vehicle. So when this body is finished, then we go on to another body, and that's what karma is all about. The actions which lead to further material bodies. And as long as we're in this material theatre, this material universe, we're in this what's called samsara, this cycle of birth, death, disease and old age, repeatedly, over and over and over again. And this astrological science can map that progress, life after life after life. It's a progression. And the ultimate understanding of karma is that it's something that you have to transcend, because otherwise even you can have good karma or bad karma. Even if you have perform lots of pious activities and deserve in your next lifetime to be a king or a prince or whatever, still you're in the cycle of birth, death, disease and old age. So ultimately the Vedic conclusion is that Tatu Brahmajigas, you have to become self-realised and realise that actually you're not part of this endless merry-go-round of one body after another. You're an eternal spirit soul, and you have an eternal spiritual home and a spiritual form, a spiritual existence. And that is the conclusion that one has to come to, and that is the context in which astrology has its rationale, its meaning, its significance.
The question on everyone's lips is really, in what practical way can really astrology help us?
Well, it's just like if you want to go on a journey, and life is like a journey, then it's helpful to have a map, because that will give you an indication of the kind of things you're going to pass on your journey. So an astrological chart is like a map of the influences that are most affecting your life, and particularly in Vedic astrology, because they have a very sophisticated system of prediction. It can tell you the kind of influence that's going to affect you at different times in your life. So if you're aware of those influences, then you can take advantage of them, just as a sailor would take advantage of fortunate winds, helpful winds, and would be aware of the rough waters. So being forewarned is to be forearmed. So that's the basic advantage of having some understanding of astrology. But it's the kind of thing that every intelligent person should know a little something about. Just like in our modern Western culture, everybody has to know a little something about how a computer works or how a car works, because that's part of our culture. And knowing something about that, about the mechanics of a car or something a little bit about computers, helps you to exist in that world. So to help us exist in the cosmic world, we ought to know a little bit something about things that influence us on a daily basis and over the course of our lives. And astrology is about that. It's about knowing when and where and how the influences are going to affect us and how to deal with them. For some people, if there's a particular planetary configuration in their chart that is going to cause difficulties at a certain time, then there are certain ways you can deal with it. You can use gems, which correspond to the planets, and that can help to modify or lessen the effects, or to increase the effect according to the effect that you want to get. Or there are mantras that you can chant and so on. There's so many different ways that having a little bit of understanding can help you deal with a problem. Just like understanding a little bit about mechanics can help you if there's a problem with your car or your computer.
That's about the predictive and to do with when things are going to happen. But what about how does astrology can tell us literally about who we are, what are our qualities, and can it explain the psychological tendencies?
It can explain lots of things. Yes.
Give us what are the various things that it can explain?
Well, by looking at an astrological chart, you can tell things about the person's character, personality, and planets will symbolise different aspects of personality, whether it's extrovert or introvert kind of person, whether they're inclined to be competitive or to be well known or to be musical and so on. There's all these different things you can tell by understanding the symbolism of the planets as they're represented in that particular chart. Other things you can understand, if you have a deeper understanding, particularly in Vedic astrology, are things like the kind of people you're going to come into contact with, what kind of children you will have, what kind of... So, in the Vedic literature, of which Vedic astrology is a significant part, this part of the Vedic science is called the Karma Kanda section, which is to do with the ordinary affairs of daily life. Love, marriage, business, society, friendship, family, and so on. And these are, to an extent, these are fairly mundane things. These are things that people want to know about. But ultimately, the higher perspective is to see oneself in relationship to the cosmos and to understand how to make the best of this particular map, this particular package, this particular journey, so that you can make progress in the greater scheme of things, which is ultimately to have an understanding of your spiritual nature or your eternal nature. And that is the context, that is the philosophical context in which astrology has significance and has meaning. Otherwise, it is just a mundane...
Given your unique situation and circumstance with the cosmic consciousness evolution that's happening on the planet and has been since the 60s, the wave that we're all involved in and connected to, how do you see the Vedic astrology bringing changes with regard to that, specifically with the cosmic and the spiritual movement of our country, our place in the planet?
That's a big question. Vedic astrology sets astrology itself in a bigger context. As I said before, astrology and Vedic astrology is no different. It deals with mundane things, everyday, ordinary things like marriage, business, occupation, income, etc. And those are things which it's useful to know about. However, the ultimate context in which that fits is what is our place in the universe, what is our purpose as human beings in this story that we're in right now. And the answer to that question, you can go to the Vedas, Tato Brahma Jigyasa, which is the conclusion of all the Vedic literatures. After Vyasa had written all the Vedic literatures, he summarised them in little shlokas. And the first one is Tato Brahma Jigyasa, which means that now that we have this human form of life, now is the time to inquire into the absolute truth. So astrology is part of the science of the truth. It's about understanding yourself in relation to the universe. But ultimately, you have to understand the nature of your being in the total bigger picture. And that starts with understanding or asking the question, who am I? What am I? Astrology is all about what do I do? But you can't mix them because they have different. But they both have the same symbolism. They both deal with the planets. They deal with the zodiac and so on. The difference with Vedic astrology is that it's much more orientated towards predicting. It's much more orientated towards events. In a sense, it's a bit more mundane than Western astrology, because Western astrology goes very deeply into psychology and propensities and so on, whereas Vedic astrology is quite often more used for telling a person who they should marry, what kind of business they should do, whether they're going to be successful and so on. But it's the context in which it's said that's different. And it's this very specific ability to be able to predict the future that makes Vedic astrology much more accurate, much more pertinent.
What is the bigger context then that Western astrology sees itself in, say, different...
Well, as I was saying before, it's about karma. It's understanding that this one particular lifetime is as the musician said in the song, just one flick in the movie. It's just part of the bigger picture. But understanding the opportunities and the propensities that you have in this lifetime can help you to make spiritual progress rather than just material progress. Material progress you can cultivate by understanding astrology. You can cultivate your strengths and your propensities, and you can make a better life for yourself. Vedic astrology differs in that it gives you the opportunity to understand your higher nature, your spiritual nature, and this gives you an opportunity to set the whole thing in a higher context so that you can become self-realized. You can make progress in understanding your relationship with the Supreme, and therefore in that context it makes things more meaningful, more continuous, more substantial.
So basically what you're saying is that it's part of a big holistic package which
Yes.
comes with a whole cultural perspective.
Exactly.
And astrology is focusing on one very specific area.
That's right, yeah. In fact, it's described, it's known as the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas. The Vedic literature is very vast, and it's deals with the whole range of human experience, from the totally transcendental to the minutely mundane. The idea being that there is a path for everybody to follow, whether you want to follow the path of a musician, whether you want to follow the path of a warrior, whatever. There is some way whereby you can follow that path and make spiritual progress at the same time.
How is that indicated? Can that be indicated or guided or alluded to in astrology?
An expert astrologer can see, by looking at a person's chart, where they are in the bigger journey.
Okay.
In what this particular lifetime, what the opportunities of this particular lifetime represent in the bigger story. They can, a really good expert astrologer will be able to tell you who you were in your last lifetime, and why in this lifetime certain obstacles have been placed in your path, or certain opportunities have been presented to you, so that you have an opportunity to make continued spiritual progress towards the ultimate goal of becoming self-realized and initiating your relationship with the Supreme, with the Divine.
Are some astrological Indian texts, like you said, most of it's to do with this very predictive mundane, but like you said, a very good astrologer. So a very good astrologer, they must be looking at all the different aspects, not because some people, spiritually minded people who are on a very deep spiritual path, they're also going to go to astrologers and want to know. So they might want to not be interested in all of those things. So what can an astrologer tell them?
It's the same kind of thing, because making spiritual advancement is not simply a question of having no material qualities. It's a matter of knowing how to use those material qualities in a spiritual way. And in a sense, this is the ultimate conclusion of all Vedic literature. It's not that the goal of philosophy and the goal of self-realization is to have no qualities. The goal is to understand how to make all your qualities transcendental and all your actions transcendental, and that is described in Vedic literature as a science of bhakti. Rather than trying to become free of the mundane world, one makes the mundane world into a spiritual realm by making your actions transcendental.
Try that.
Try what? Try